So why we're here tonight, a little bit about the Mind Blank Mental Health Program, is we are fortunate that during COVID-19, like just before everything started, the New South Wales government did fund Mind Blank to create an online mental health education program. And from that, we've actually had opportunities not just to work with the Public Service Union of New South Wales, but the Queensland Public Service Union as well. So our programs so far, particularly in the workplace, have actually gone and helped over 500 work health and safety reps and their teams during this time. So mental health is a big conversation need right now. Work health and safety reps understand that mental health is a risk for their staff, but what we've dealt with in 2020 is a heap of change. And many businesses have had to pivot online, have had to really transition people into remote working, and have been caught a little bit unprepared of the amount of stress that comes with some of those changes. So where we are now is we are fortunate that the Queensland government has actually funded the Mind Blank Workplace program. Between now and December 2020, 400 women will be prioritised through the program. So that's why I've asked these panellists to get together today, because let's have a conversation as to why we need to support women, why we need to support women in the workplace, what type of messages can we send out there to be proactive about mental health intervention, early intervention, rather than waiting in the uncertainty and dealing with mental health crisis. So yeah, that's a little bit of what we do. I will drop some conversations in the comment box later for you to see a little bit about our program, because we are actually seeking expressions of interests from businesses as well as from women who are interested in going through the program. My final touch point for you all is that we will be talking about mental health today. So if there is anything that comes in any of the conversation that feels overwhelming or a little bit close to home for you, we will be mindful of how we have these conversations. But I will make sure that there is some help seeking information attached to where the program is being streamed, as well as to the YouTube channel, so that people do have some direct portals to go to should they need help and support in this time. So do feel free to reach out to us. We are here to actually help and listen and help guide towards what help may be available if you do feel like your mental and emotional health may be triggered during this point, as 2020 is just a game changer. So I think I've just about done enough talking for tonight. I have invited some very special and important women here today to help us have these conversations. And to get started, what I'm going to do is just introduce each of the ladies, share a little bit about their background or what businesses they're working in. And my question to you all as I introduce you is if you can share with us why this project or this subject in particular resonates with you. So to get started, absolute pleasure to introduce Pierce Mitchell, who I know personally through the Women's Business School. Pierce, for anyone that doesn't know her, is behind the Mumpreneur network, and it's a fantastic online business that she co-founded several years ago. What I absolutely love and value in the work that she does is there's an opportunity for women to connect with other women, and those that run their own business know how overwhelming it can be. Women in general, there's some mental health stats that say that 1 in 5 will experience depression, 1 in 6 will experience anxiety. You know, women in general are more at risk at burnout than their male colleagues, but then those who are entrepreneurs are even more at risk. And in particular with Pierce Your Network, we've got women in business that are also mothers. So I'd like to introduce Pierce to just share with us. The question was, why does this subject in particular resonate with you?
Well, hi, Ali, and hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. As Ali said, I'm co-founder of AusMumpreneur and the Women's Business School as well. I have a community of 50,000 women from all over.
No, that's okay. No problem.
And
yes. So
I'm really proud to have women surrounding me and supporting me and inspiring me with my dreams. And all of these women are following their dream as well of starting their own business and creating that flexibility with raising a family and running a business. So that's what I do. I'm really passionate about this topic, and thank you so much to Ali and the team for inviting me to be here today. In my experience working with mums in home-based business, it's very isolating. So the women I'm speaking to, they're not all in the cities, they're in remote, rural, regional areas of Australia. So that kind of, the isolation of distance is difficult. But even the women living in the cities, they're at home with young children. And so that makes getting to networking events and going to business events very difficult as well. So it can be quite isolating being at home. And I think that's a huge factor when it comes to mental health. And 2020 is a great example of that. The isolation, the lockdown, and not letting people be with each other has had huge impacts on mental health. So it's really important. And our online community was created, AusMumpreneur was completely created to provide that connection for women in an online space, so where they could come together and, you know, find their people and talk to people who understood the challenges that they were going through, and that they could share the wins along the way as well, and provide that support and connection.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Pierce, for sharing that connection with us today. My next guest that I would love to introduce you all is Carla Wall. Now, Carla, I believe we crossed paths indirectly. It was part of the Greater Brisbane Women in Business Awards. And now I wasn't actually present at that event, but I was a finalist as part of one of the Young Business Awards at the time. And for those that don't know Carla, she did win the 2018 Greater Brisbane Women in Business of the Year Award. And she's also currently General Manager and Business Development Strategist for Surepact. So I'd like to introduce you, Carla, and just ask, why does this subject in particular resonate with you?
Thanks, Ali. I always get tongue-tied with that as well. I could never say it. So thank you for doing that on my behalf. That was wonderful. And thanks for inviting me on to the panel today, and hey to everyone who signed in. It's great to be here. So I've worked in the construction and technology space pretty much my entire career. And I know that's difficult to believe because I don't look a day over 25. Thank you, guys. Thank you. And I guess they're two really challenging industry sectors to work in. They're both highly male-dominated environments. And as women, I think we have to really fight to sometimes be listened to, heard, and maybe understood. So we tend to build up really high levels of resilience and persistence, I guess, to keep on putting up that fight that we do. And those two industries, particularly the construction industry, they're very well known for having very high levels of suicide, marriage breakdowns, and very, very poor health. So for me, it's very important to be here today to support those two business sectors, to support women in that space, but also to really put a message out there in terms of the awareness piece, because for me, there's been a few times, I guess, throughout my career where I've found organisations that have perhaps just had the tick in the EAP provider box. And I've done this myself. There was an organisation that I managed at one point in time, and actually looked at a tier 1 construction company and thought, hey, I'll follow those guys. I'll put in place what they've got from an EAP provider perspective. And went through the motions of getting that in place. And really, it was just a tick in the box. It wasn't actually providing any awareness, any wellness kind of programs in terms of educating and training people. And I got to a stumble point with that, where a member of my team actually had a paranoid schizophrenic episode during work. And the first thing I needed to do was obviously look after him, and also had the concern of my team at heart. But rang the EAP provider looking for help, because the staff wanted to know, what should they do? How do they manage this situation? How do they approach this individual when they come back to work? So I was really concerned about being able to put in place the right education and training. And this EAP provider came back to me and said, there's nothing they could do for probably 12 weeks. And I just thought, wow, that is just incredible. So it's really important, I think, as leaders to understand, you know, let's not have a tick in the box from an EAP perspective. It's not a case of set and forget. You know, that's the wrong attitude to take around mental health and wellness. And actually that leads to building the opposite. You can create a really toxic culture for everybody in the workplace. And let's face it, I think mental health impacts each and every person completely differently. You know, you're in your own reality, and our work, the work environment and our colleagues have a really major impact on how, you know, our mental health continues from that point forward. So that's my interest in being here today.
Thank you so much. And what a spot on observation that you've made, encouraging the conversations that we will have tonight. Just quickly, two things that are spinning through my head is that I've been shocked as a mental health provider ourselves, in terms of we're in the mental health sector, working alongside businesses. Work health and safety law changed in 2016. So now businesses are actually liable for their workers' mental health. And that transition or awareness, there are many businesses that aren't aware of that yet, you know, so there's a little bit of a lag of translation in terms of what we do with that knowledge. So that's spinning through my head. It's an opportunity for anyone hearing here tonight, is just in case you weren't aware, you know, there are different laws in various different states and territories as to how we do handle it, but it is fabulous to see that it is considered as a work health and safety risk. But there is a bit of an uncertainty from a business perspective as to what does mental health look like, how does it actually apply, and how do we lead our staff during these very difficult situations? Because mental health crisis, generally you need mental health professionals to deal with that. But the second point I wanted to make is the state of the health sector. For the general public, you may not know, but there is more need out there, as in people that need help and support for their mental health, then there are actually services that can catch it. So there'll never be enough doctors, psychologists, counselors, social workers, EAP providers that can catch some of this workload. And that's some of the issue that we're facing. So sometimes that does mean that mental health does creep into the workplace. And if you're a business leader, a manager, or even a staff member, knowing what to do in a time of need will help support these individuals that could be experiencing that. So I'd like to introduce the next panelist, who we've had a basic introduction to the construction world, but Amanda is the founder and chairperson of the Awesome Women in Construction organization. So I'd like to introduce Amanda. Can you please share with us, why does this project in particular resonate with you?
Hi everybody, and thanks for the invitation to join you all tonight. So for me, it's pretty simple. You know, after working in the industry for 20 years, construction industry, and having started Awesome Women in Construction, it's simply about being part of the solution and acknowledging and starting to talk about the elephant in the room. There's a lot of businesses and even individuals that's, you know, still a taboo topic, and let's not talk about it because then it doesn't exist. So it's time to shine a nice big spotlight on it, and let's start the conversation.
Fantastic. Thanks, Amanda. It was short and sweet. And what I love from our collaboration so far with you, Amanda, is yes, you're leading great conversations in the construction space and supporting women in an industry that is very far from where I stand, which is potentially supporting artists or supporting mental health and the social work, right? But the conversations and knowledge that we have, very versatile. We are all individuals, and as workers, we are individuals that are also part of a workplace. So what we've found is that it doesn't matter what sector you're part of, it's very basic knowledge that we're actually missing that we need to educate people on.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just knowing about where to go for that information.
Fantastic. Absolutely. I do hear you there, and I'm sure you and I can talk about that for ages. So we'll raise that question again shortly. I would like to introduce the final panelist, Michelle O'Hara, the wonderful, energetic Michelle. part of O Marketing, who's helping support this project, and Mindblank. Why does this project in particular resonate with you, Michelle?
Firstly, thank you, Ali, for having me today, and for all of you who have jumped on, lovely to have you here. Look, for me, Ali, it's interesting because, as you said, you know, being positive is sort of something that I was brought up with. And to be honest, I think with everything that's been happening this year, it's really showed me that the stigma of you not being okay is okay to talk about. Like, I mean, I grew up in a family where you sort of pushed everything under the carpet and just got on with it. And I think now it's really important to, well, firstly, to that you're not alone in these situations. There are others in the same situation, and that it is okay to talk about it. So stigma is one of the big things I think, you know, we can all push to the side. And that's lovely that it comes to the forefront. The other thing for me and my team has been that we predominantly work with men with our client base. And, you know, as a woman, we tend to take on that nurturing role. So we've sort of taken on the support. And of course, with that support and positivity, you're carrying a lot of your clients' stress and pressure and please save me attitude. And that in itself, it's so important for me to be looking at both, you know, everyone in the team to make sure that they're okay, because they too are carrying it. I'm carrying it, you know, so for me, having these conversations are just imperative. Yeah.
For sure. And I think that you've also hit on there that for all the panelists that have just spoken, we all are leaders in business as well, you know, so that there's additional stresses that comes with these roles. And for the women that are also mothers, you know, there are full plates in front of us. You know, that's one thing I've certainly noticed when it comes to conversations with women in business is sometimes it's boundary setting or conversations, because we do want to take on those extra workloads, whether it's our staff workload or our clients, or we do tend to be in that role that does take on more on our plate. So thank you everyone for your contributions so far and your fantastic answers. What I would like to do is lead the conversation next to go towards Carla, sorry. I have asked you to see if you could share some notes of your personal story with us. And I am pleased to hear that you did actually respond. And I just think that there's so much that we can learn from raw and authentic stories. So I want to congratulate you for taking a step up today to really be able to share an opportunity to hear what we can learn from your own personal story.
Thank you, Ali. As you know, we had a conversation about this a couple of days ago. So yeah, I decided for this talk, what I would do is really go back in time and share some extracts from some old journals. So I've journaled for many years now, just doing things like a drain and sustain audit, you know, what's going on in my life, am I ruminating? But the extracts I'm going to share with you today from some time ago really are going to explain to you what a major burnout sounded like and felt like for me. So I'll kick off, and it is going to be a little bit raw for me going through this, but I'm happy to share with you and hopefully it creates that awareness and people can take something away from that. So I'm going back in time. Here we go. I have a visit to the doctors this morning. I'm anxious about driving, as have already had 2 car accidents in the last few months and have resorted to taking taxis whenever I can. I arrive in the doctor's surgery and he asks me, how can I help? My response was, I need you to get me to stop. Work is killing me. the workload is just so overwhelming. I don't have enough staff. I'm constantly living away from home in hotels, and I'm averaging a 70 to 80 hour week every week just to try and stay on top of things. I rarely see my boss, and there's no support coming, even though I've asked for it and proposed strategies for how this could change. So it feels to me right now like work has become this unhealthy addiction, something that I can't step away from, and I need that help to be able to step away. So what I did then was I listed all of my symptoms that I was experiencing at that time, and I'd written them on my phone because I could not recall things very well either, and proceeded to read out the following list. So I had permanent headaches, ringing in both of my ears, bad back. I had chronic fatigue, so I was falling asleep pretty much all weekend. I would be asleep. In the evenings, I'd drop off to sleep on the sofa, and then when I went to bed at night, I couldn't stay asleep. I had shortness of breath. My bowels weren't functioning particularly well. I had a lack of concentration and this really weird communication deficiency where when I was speaking, my fluidity of speech was all over the place. Things were just coming out back to front, and had a really foggy mind, and short-term memory was particularly dreadful for me. So I'd lost the ability to relax. I'd lost interest in exercise, in socializing, and they were the things really that were sustaining me previously in terms of, you know, resting and playing and be able to have that creative mind that you need as a leader. I also had heart palpitations. I'd feel jumpy, you know, someone could approach me and I'd jump out of my skin. And I noticed I'd also started to respond emotionally to people and situations in a very different way to how I had before. And the one thing that really got me, which I pride myself on, is my decision-making and problem-solving ability just reduced dramatically. And I was really taking an hour-by-hour approach. So as suspected, when I relayed this to the doctor, he then hit me with the fact that I was at major burnout stage and recommended signing me off for an initial period of 2 weeks. I then burst into tears, and these were a mix of tears, I guess, both of relief and also utter horror. Because the more I thought about that, it just terrified me. You know, I was sick to the stomach. I'd never been off sick really for more than a couple of days at a time. And the 2-week period just sounded absolutely terrifying for me and my brain to really compute when I was struggling just to get through each of those days, let alone to kind of face a 2-week period of time off. And really, taking time off was not going to resolve the issue that was already there, which was the unmanageable workload that I had. There was no one that I could hand that to, and it would just be mounting up for me while I was off on that 2-week period until I then returned. So my strategy at that point was to try and negotiate with my doctor and suggest that in order for my brain to compute that, let's just call it a week, on the basis that I then returned to see him the following week. So that was how that kind of played out. So I went home and planned my calls then to the executive leadership team and also my CEO, and let them know I'd be off for that week and why, and what I felt needed to be put in place. So from there, sadly, the contact from work, whilst it did reduce, it did not stop. So the week off sick was not a week off sick. I limped along, dug deep with the resilience and the persistence, and thought, you know, this will pass. And as promised, I returned to the doctors then the following week, where the same pattern then continued for another month. meanwhile, I decided, you know, there's something I must be able to do here for myself. So I sought the help of a psychologist, and I also engaged a performance coach, along with getting the support of my family and friends. And this was where I found I was starting to feel a little bit safer and being heard and understood by those people that were around me, that I cared about. But the problem was, things at work didn't change. And these next extracts from my journal were probably, I don't know, maybe in a month and a half on from that point. Statements that I wrote down about how I was feeling. I'm exhausted, being exhausted. I've achieved 2 to 3 hours sleep per night all week this week. I'm doing all I can to help myself, and my husband is being amazingly supportive. But I can see it's also beginning to trigger his anxiety and affect his sleep. It feels like I am beginning to affect so many people around me because of the situation that I find myself in at work. These drugs they've prescribed me aren't helping me sleep. I've stopped exercising. I'm drinking more. My diet is poor, as I just simply don't have the time or the energy to cook. And pretty much all socializing has stopped, as I spend what time I do have simply trying to recover. At work, everyone around me is expecting change to occur faster than we can realistically execute. We're about 25% down on resources. I'm wearing far too many hats, and I can see my leadership team is now also starting to feel the impact of the resource issues. Yet, despite repeatedly asking for support and sharing where I am at with the whole team and my CEO, nothing is changing. And I'm lost with this, because I thought we were a values-led business. With these mounting expectations, I'm continuing weekend working and increasing my hours, spending all my time in all the wrong places, and alone most nights of the week, stuck in hotels, airport lounges, restaurants, planes, and hire cars. How much longer will this go on before my CEO hears me? I'm now considering resigning. As for me, I've always put people first, and I've taken care of those in my charge. And now, when I, as the leader, need that support, where is it? So you see, my personal values were now really compromised, and I've always believed that when we care about each other personally, as real people, we care about each other professionally. So how could I possibly continue? You're probably thinking now. I know I was, but I did. I kept digging, and I had a holiday ahead of me at the time. So I managed to finally secure, through my contacts, an executive resource for on-the-ground support while I was away. Sadly, the downtime that I so very much needed, after week 1, I was dragged back into urgent business matters that continued for the rest of my leave. So you can imagine I then arrived back in the office. Post my holiday, I hold another executive leadership meeting to obtain status update on what's happened while I'm away. Obviously, I knew a few things because I'd been dragged into them, and reminded that team that I cannot cope with going on at that pace of what I've been doing and the hours and the continuing working away from home, as was in this major burnout. Sadly, there was no plan for me. There was no support. And I recall having to leave that particular meeting and go outside for a walk, as all of those symptoms I talked about earlier, the tears and the heart palpitation and the anxiety, all came back. And I was broken at that point and gutted that no one was really taking this seriously with me, and I felt very alone, particularly as I'd always taken care of everyone else and created a mentally well workplace for my team. But why was I any different in that moment? So I went home that night and spoke with my poor old husband, and we'd had many chats over the months and the years about this situation, I guess, that I'd found myself in. And I explained that, you know, now was the time to resign. The support not coming, despite the repeated requests and the strategies that I was putting forward. And it was really obvious to me at that point that I'd lost who I was. My personal identity had disappeared, and that had been replaced by work. And the reason for that is I was in a toxic environment where my mental health and well-being was not being supported. And as I explained to Jason, I wasn't prepared to lose any more at that point in my life, like my marriage, or to end up in a psychiatric ward. So we sat and we chatted and we worked out a plan, and it was a bloody tough decision. And it wasn't something that I actively wanted to do, resign, but it was obvious to me these things were not going to change. And we have to put our mental health and well-being first and foremost. So when I resigned, I asked if I could work part-time during that period of time. I was happy to do a handover, and that was declined. So I ended up working full-time for my entire notice period. And this really clarified everything for me then that I needed to know, in terms of me backing myself and making the right decision to leave that organisation. And it took me well over 12 months to recover from that major burnout. So that's kind of the end of my journal extract. But I guess the things that I've learned and the moments of hope for me that sat in there, as a few of my friends signed in here today, so thanks to those guys because they supported me. But learning to recognise the signs and lean into your values sooner is really difficult sometimes, particularly if you're a leader of an organisation and you've got those high levels of resilience and persistence. And I think a lot of leaders can actually, what I'm terming, linger too long. When you can see the cracks in the company values presented numerous times to you and they're not being addressed, I think planning your exit sooner is something that I would definitely consider moving forward, as you're just digging that hole deeper and wider and you're continuing to try and fix what I believe amounts to either a toxic environment or a toxic leader within that environment that's creating that situation. And at the end of the day, you know, your health is more important, and it's possible to start a career several times over in your lifetime. And it might feel dreadful at the time, but it really is possible to keep reinventing yourself. So, you know, anyone who's maybe kind of thinking they're in this burnout situation at the moment, I would say to you, it doesn't lie with the individual. It lies with the organisation having good hygiene for mental health and well-being. And the wellness offerings should be included as part of that organisation strategy. It's not just a tick in the box. People need to have discussions with their leaders, with their CEOs, with their teams, one-on-one. Talking to my husband and my family and my friends, my psychologist, the performance coach, they were the things that really, really helped me. Those talk therapies were my saviour. It was my safe place where I got to explore what was my reality. And they were there. I could ask them for support. They'd listen. It was a safe space. And I thank all of those people. I love them dearly for their patience, their love and support. I know it was probably a real pain in the backside. So thanks, everyone. And really, we've got to continue to value ourselves, treat ourselves with kindness and respect, and set some boundaries. So as much as that, I think, sounds like a whole load of hard work, it's worth it. It takes patience. And slowly it becomes easier and life changes. We change and nothing stays the same forever. And there was a lovely post that I saw a guy called Vinay Nair make online this morning, and it said, look inside and be your own leader. When we believe we deserve better and that we can change our destiny, we can live our lives being truthful to our inner self, as opposed to living your life for someone else. And that's probably my takeaway, and where I'll kind of close on that story this evening. Thank you.
I just want a round of applause too, even though you won't hear anyone else do it, but I'm so grateful to have you here, Carla. It breaks my heart to hear stories like yours. And the reality is there are people that do share and disclose stories as such that do find permanent challenges. You know, we have a choice as to what we do, and I can feel that you're a natural born leader, and it's fantastic that you are here today with us and that you are here to be able to advocate the need of prevention. You know, and what I like and echo back from hearing your story is the need for leaders and businesses to realize that, yes, it's not just a matter of ticking a box that we've got EAP services, so that's a counselling services for the crisis situations, but there's actually a need now to identify the wellness strategy for workplaces. Yeah. And that is a responsibility for workers. And even as individuals, we can make some calls here, because it breaks my heart to hear how many individuals feel similar situations and the only way is out. And sometimes the environment can be so toxic that that is the only solution, but it's very disheartening to hear so many individuals feel like they do get to that point.
Yeah, I think those prevention strategies can be put in place so much earlier. Building that awareness and education is such a key part of that. As you said, you know, the EAP, it's too late. We've got to be putting this in place before then. And, you know, reducing the stigma that is still attached to mental health. You know, it's taken a pandemic for people to actually be getting this on the table as a real discussion in the workplace. And it's becoming very apparent, you know, not everyone's suited to working from home. Not everybody has the luxury of a large property with an office. They're not used to being isolated and on their own. You know, it's a complete change of environment and mental and physical state for people to be in. So how do we, you know, address those kind of things in terms of reducing that stigma? And I think for me, that's really around introducing more regular check-ins on staff's well-being and asking the right questions. And for leaders to be able to ask the right questions, they need the training and the awareness. It's not, you know, this is not a one-to-one where we're checking how you're doing with your work. This is a one-to-one, we're checking how that person's feeling and what's going on for them right now, and being in a position where they feel safe having that conversation. I was actually 100%. Chatting to my mum about this the other day, and, you know, no one should really be taking anyone on expecting that person to fail. We should be taking them on and setting them up for success. And that's something I've always strived to do. And mental health and wellness should be part of that success plan. It's not all about setting objectives around business performance and delivery of those results, it's also about taking care of each other's mental health and well-being.
100%. And there's two things that I just want to note before we actually get into the rest of the questions for tonight. The one thing I wanted to highlight was working alongside these union bodies. I know that there is a level of frustration as well on their end for the fact that many businesses do not realize that there are liabilities as well for the workplaces if they don't provide support for a wellness culture. That's on them, you know, and sometimes people aren't aware of that, so they haven't actually put anything in place for that. I can't remember my second talking point, but that's okay. I might just let that one go. Let's get straight into some of the other questions. So the question I have for the panelists, and I might just go down the order again to see what insight you do have, but this question is, share in your own words, why is it important to support women in particular in the workforce? So I'll go back to Pierce if that's okay.
Thanks, Ali. I think it's really important to support women in the workplace because women are the ones who are holding everybody else up. They, you know, particularly the mothers, they're looking after the children, but all women are often the ones who are looking after extended families. You know, it's the women who remember when it's your aunt's birthday, or organise everything for Christmas, organise family get-togethers. It's the women who are looking after elderly neighbours and checking in on other people in the community. And so if the women aren't supported in that role, and they're unwell and they have a breakdown and can't keep going, then all of that support that they're providing is lost as well. And that can be really damaging to a community, to a family. The impact can be huge. So I think it's really important to be looking after the women and making sure that they're supported.
Fantastic. I absolutely agree. And it's interesting that you've just highlighted there for me and for businesses, really, there's all these hidden costs that are involved when you're supporting, you know, different women in your workplace that you may not be aware of. So when a staff member is unwell, there could be all those other things that drop as well. Carla, I know that you've shared quite a lot just then, but in your words, why is it important to support women in the workforce?
Particularly from my point of view, I guess I'll talk about that from the male-dominated environments that I've found myself in. It's perhaps harder for those women to share, and you can find on a lot of construction sites, there's probably not many women on there at all. So your colleagues are generally men, and I think men have a tough time as it is in the construction industry with sharing their feelings and their emotions, and they generally don't share it with women. They probably generally more share it with men when they're down the pub than they would with a woman. So I think creating more awareness and assisting women and letting them know, you know, it's okay not to be okay, and to just talk to someone. That was the most powerful thing for me that I did during the time that I went through burnout. If I hadn't have been talking to people, who knows what the situation could be today. It could be very, very different. I think men and women need support. I'm not going to single out either women or men, to be honest, because I like to see men supporting women and women supporting men. And I think that's where we see the material change that starts to actually occur, is when we come together.
100%. And I guess I just want to share in there that for those that do know me, you'll know that I'm a suicide prevention advocate. And what Carla just mentioned is the importance of a conversation, you know, and getting to know the people around us and being there to really listen and be there for others is such an important key value for those that may be struggling during this time. Amanda, in your words, why is it important to support women in the workforce? I know you've created an entire cause to back this very issue.
So for me, it's about the diversity and the skills that they bring to the table. whether it's in a board situation, whether it's in a leadership, in a mentoring, you know, that nurturing role is part of our makeup, whether we like it or not. And it does come into the workforce. So whether it's, you know, the new receptionist or the trainee estimator or whoever it is, we do on occasion, generally, unofficially take them under our wing and guide them through that. So for me, it's about the diversity and the skills that they can bring to the table.
For sure. For the way you just presented that to me, it sounds like there's an echo of some of that silent support as well that we may not always be measuring, but we bring to the table. And finally, Michelle, for you, why is it important to support women in the workforce?
Firstly, can I say thank you, Carla, for sharing your story, because you reminded me back of my corporate days and why I became an entrepreneur in the first place and went out on my own. I had forgotten. I think I had pushed it down so far, but went through all that same thing. And I actually wrote down 3 friends' names who are going through that exact thing you're just talking about, and thought I need to reach out to them. So I really appreciated that. For me, I think it's important, and something that I've sort of fought with is, as women in business and as women leaders, it's important that we support each other to thrive, because we really do deserve it. You know, it's not like the olden days where, you know, do the washing, not that I'm saying don't do all that. My husband's wonderful. But, you know, we do deserve to thrive and to be the best that we can be and have the diversity, like Amanda said, etc. So without each other's support and that strength of other women, you know, it's really hard, because you can't, you know, when you've only got the men as your role models, we've got to sort of stand by each other and support each other to get there.
For sure. And that's why I love the Women's Business School. Just saying, I will plug it, like I am an alumni of that course, but the AusMumpreneur Network for me stands for a fantastic network of women in business that are all there as a tribe to raise each other up. You know, and it's a very feminine way to lead business, which is almost opposite to corporate, because corporate's that ladder that can be cutthroat and you just got to do what you got to do to get to the next level. But that's what I find with women in business. It's about raising each other up and building those connections, because we need it. We all need it, you know, to support this tribe around us. So I'll throw it on to the next question. Piers, how has your productivity changed since COVID-19? 2020 has been a heck of a year. And what messages do you have for other women during this time? Women or men? It's up to you.
Thanks, Sally. Oh, 2020, wow, what a year. We're never going to forget 2020. I think it's really interesting, this question, and I was reflecting on what did happen back at the start, back in March. And I remember like automatically wanting to go out and help people and rescue everybody and do all crazy things. And then I took a step back and I said, no, let's just go calmly. This looks like it's going to be a long-term thing. It's going to be a marathon, not a sprint. Let's just watch what's happening and provide support where we can. And I saw a lot of businesses scrambling and hustling and trying to pivot really quickly. And then like those things not working out, and then trying to re-scramble over here. And yeah, it's been really interesting watching that and observing how different people handle it. And so I think what I've seen a lot of people do is look at things strategically, and they're doing that. They're taking the step back and they're working on things behind the scenes to get ready to ramp up for their next thing, rather than scrambling to try and move straight into the next, you know, straight away onto something. So yeah, for me, it's been like a balance, because we've pivoted things. We normally run a massive event in Melbourne each year with 500 people. And so obviously that wasn't able to happen. And so we've had to reimagine things. And we ended up running that event as an online event, which was actually incredible. And instead of reaching 400 people at that event, we had 30,000 people watching live. So it's quite incredible when you open your eyes to new possibilities. And I think that, you know, as hard a year as this has been, it's also actually opened the door to all kinds of opportunities and given everybody a chance to look at things differently, to try things they've never tried before as well. We've been like experimenting, like, well, if it's all going to hell in a handbasket, may as well give this a go and see what happens. And it's been interesting. And that relationship with the community, you know, it's coming back to the connection, as, you know, we've all been talking about. But yeah, building that relationship with the community, being really authentic and sharing what we're going through, telling them, you know, we've got doubts. We don't know whether this is going to work, but let's try, let's do this together and see what happens. And I think that's been a big part of my 2020 journey. At the start of the year, my word for 2020 was vision. And I think that word has been really good, because in vision, it's really about, my vision has been about keeping my eye on the big picture. What is our long-term goal? And our goal is to create a global business school for women. And that hasn't changed, even though I can't fly to London now and meet people in the UK or fly to the US or whatever. That long-term goal of supporting women and connecting women, we're still doing that. And we're finding lots of different ways of doing that. So yeah, it's been an interesting year.
Fantastic, and congratulations, 30,000 women through the online program. That's amazing, and hats off to you for, you know, taking the risk and being bold and pivoting. And I feel very fortunate with Mindblank and what we've done this year as well, to have experienced some fantastic pivoting moments as well, not without effort and not without learning the technology pains, you know. But congratulations and thank you for sharing that with us. Carla, just to repeat the question, how has your productivity changed since COVID started? What messages do you have for other women or men during this time?
I guess it's really important not to, for me, having been through a burnout, as I mentioned, it's really important for me not to be filling up a diary 7 days a week, rushing from one meeting to the next. There's a lot of Zoom meetings, back-to-back Microsoft Teams meetings that I'm aware that people have had. So just some really simple boundaries to put in place, I think, within organisations, are realising that it's actually okay to have a 15-minute break between one Zoom meeting to the next Zoom meeting. You know, people have got basic needs, guys. You know, we all need to go for a pee. We all need to get a drink, and we all need to have something to eat. So this ridiculous expectation, I guess, that some of us have started to put on ourselves to always be on and always be at the desk, and for us to be seen as being online, I think just drop that crap. Seriously, you know, we're all in our roles for a particular reason. We should be trusted and respected to be able to deliver on those roles. We've just got to manage people in a slightly different way now moving forwards. So I think having those boundaries in place. So one of the things that I would do, for example, it's really, really basic, but it works well for me, is I plan out my diary where I'm going to be spending my time 2 weeks ahead. And I actually program in to my diary when those lunch breaks are going to be. I decline meetings if they're back-to-back meetings. Everyone in the team knows we need to have 15 minutes between those meetings. And it's really beneficial, because whilst it may sound really basic, we don't want to be in a position where we've got cognitive depletion, which is occurring in the team, and a drop in that productivity. So that's actually helping the business as much as it is helping that individual. So it's they're healthy boundaries to create within your day-to-day life in terms of how you're planning, managing and organising your time. The second thing for me is I am a mental health first aider, and I would recommend that all organisations have a look at how many employees they've got, how many mental health first aiders they have, and what things they're actually doing from a mental health awareness point of view. If people are not trained in educating and making people aware of what these particular issues can look like. Ali, I know I've been on some of the video production panels that you've had before, and they've been really, really helpful when you put yourselves in someone else's shoes, like you've managed to achieve through those video production sessions. You can actually see where the manifestation of these mental health issues and things like anxiety and depression can actually start, and actually how they are impacted even further by your work colleagues. And it's just because the work colleague is not trying to be bloody minded or horrible. They just are not aware of what impact they are having on other people within their team. So they're probably the two things that I would suggest people are having a look at.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that we have heard echoed throughout various businesses is when you don't define what to do in a time of need, unfortunately, sometimes accidental counselling can occur where work colleagues who are not trained mental health professionals, you know, fill in those shoes and try and support someone and take on too much burden, becoming a counterproductive strategy for both parties. You know, so I do echo the support mental health first aid program is a fantastic starting point to skill staff, but also what proactive early intervention plans, what policies does your workplace have to address mental wellness as a strategy, because it covers tier down, you know, address it from the top and tier down. And before I forget, there was one point that Pierce had mentioned was about leading through uncertainty. I was fortunate enough to be a speaker at a business who they had forgotten they were leading with whirlwinds of change and dealing with KPIs, but had forgotten to just tell their staff that I care, or I don't know what to do now, but we're onto it. You know, so treating people as people rather than as just another number, but it's this whirlwind of not quite knowing how to deal with it. So we're taking care of maybe the finances or whatever's necessary to get those KPIs or business through the door, but we kind of just forgot the human element of it, which is unfortunate. But yeah, yay 2020. Amanda, you're next. How has 2020 changed you, and what message do you have for other women or men during this time?
Well, 2020. So for me, from an Awesome Women in Construction point of view, it's definitely been, you know, we had our International Women's Day, we had an event up at Toowoomba at the TAFE College, and then all of a sudden, you know, the world went on lockdown. So it was very much about, you know, sitting back and reassessing and seeing, you know, what exactly was going to happen. And like the other panelists have mentioned, you know, this wasn't going to be something that was going to be over in a couple of weeks. So it was very much about, you know, reassessing and, you know, deciding instead of writing this out, whatever this was going to be, was to try and get in front of it and to try and, you know, provide resources for our members and for our community about how they can, you know, just keep connecting with each other. You know, we had Friday afternoon events. We had you know, we spun everything around that was on virtual, and, you know, it definitely has paid off. It was hard work, but our members, you know, our membership base grew, which to me showed that they still needed that community. They still might have been locked in at home, but they still needed to reach out, and particularly if they were, you know, living on their own. You know, they didn't have that husband or son or daughter or whoever to even just say good morning to, you know, that really basic human connection. You know, if we had to get it through a screen, well, then that's how we got it.
You did mention your business grew, yes, in this time. I am shocked and, how do I say it? Like, I reflect on seeing so many businesses that have had actually a fortunate year despite crisis, you know, and actually part of the Women in Business Awards, there were some women there that had gone through the floods, the fires, and now COVID, you know, and just hearing their stories about their resilience and what they're doing with it and how they've overcome it and how this is the best year ever. You know, not everyone, But it's fantastic to hear that there's some great trends that are happening here in 2020. Lucky last, Michelle, and I'd like to also encourage those that are left here in the panel. I only have one more question left for the ladies, and it's about what have they done to support their team's mental health during the last 6 months. But we have already heard some of these tips already, so I'm not sure if the chat feature is actually working in this box, but okay, it seems like the chat feature is, so we will be taking some questions from the audience very shortly. But in the meantime, Michelle, what has 2020 been like, and what advice do you have for others in this time?
I'll be quick. For me, it's been a wonderful personal lesson, because it really helped me to stop and slow down, a bit like what Carla was saying about my boundaries. I culled a lot, because at the time, actually, I was in my element. It's funny, because when everybody needed to pivot and everything like that, that's my element. So, however, as a result of that, I did end up being exhausted. So I really had to cull back what was not serving, or filling my tank, and be really clear with myself as to what I really wanted going forward. What I found really interesting and a good lesson for me was how differently everybody handled situations. That was a really big learning curve for me, because where you thought people would be strong, they necessarily weren't. Where you thought, so the judgment around all of that was all gone, and that was a really beautiful lesson. From a team perspective, etc., flexibility. I mean, I've always had a very flexible attitude, but even more so based upon, where are people at and what do they need. So I think that's one thing, particularly when it comes to corporate, that they've realized now that they can, have working from home, etc. But they've got to make sure they don't lose that flexibility and lose, people's people are not stupid. They can look after themselves and get the job done. So give them that empowerment, and don't go back to the old way of control, I think, is an important thing. But for men and women, really the word going forward is listen to your body, and balance. And if you are tired, stop. That's been my biggest. So, days get cut short, and that's okay. That's the most important thing. It's okay.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's okay. And, for leaders, you're never going to catch up, ever. You're never going to get on top of things, ever. You've just got to learn to, really let that go. And I think the pandemic's been really interesting, because one of the things I always go on about is change is constant, and it is an inevitable thing. And it's our ability to be able to manage that change that is a necessity. However, the change that we have gone through has been so significant this year. I think that's what's causing the exhaustion. The response, I think, immediately from employers was almost like a tick list sheet that they had of, right, we need to tick this, and this off, and we'll fire all these emails out. I don't know whether you felt the same here, Michelle, but a lot of organizations, it was just email freaking overload. And they were trying to build this training and awareness, but actually all they were doing was exhausting people with the amount of information that was coming out.
Correct.
Yeah,
and the technology, like Ali said, all of that. I mean, people just were not only getting bombarded with having to, particularly with Zoom, a lot of people had never used Zoom, and now, or Microsoft Teams or anything, and suddenly it was like, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. Oh, but at the same time, don't lose productivity, and at the same time, don't, and stay home with the kids and be half dead, and good luck with that.
How dare you leave your desk? Don't leave your desk for even like 2 minutes. Do not go to the toilet. Do not pass go. You must be there permanently. It's been incredible. I think just picking up on one of your points there, Michelle, as well, in terms of who can step up in a crisis. That's always something really interesting, because like yourself, I love crises and I love stepping into that. And you're right, you do have to be careful from an exhaustion point of view. And it's also good, I think, to understand your teams really, really well, There's a couple of tools that I use. One is called Brisbane. I don't know if you've heard of that. And it looks at an individual's team roles. So what kind of role, everyone has 9 roles. So for example, you've got a shaper and a plant and an investigator, and they will provide different things. And you will have 2 or 3 of those, which are your top team roles. And you can perform all 9, but they're your top 2 or 3 that you're really going to be able to deliver well on. So you can imagine if you're, I don't know, maybe your 9th one is an implementer and it's on a graph, and that's your lowest bar, and you've maybe got 2 or 3%. The last thing that you want to do as a leader for that person is put them into that role for a period of time that they cannot manage, because that is not their superpower. So we really need to start understanding what are individual superpowers within our teams. Brisbane is a really good one. There's also a lady called Julie Gillespie, who's one of my contacts, and she does strengths profiling. So it's a similar thing, but it's a lot deeper than the Brisbane profiling. And that's probably another way where I think leaders can start to understand what are their staff superpowers, what are their untapped powers that they're not really tapping into right now. So that's really important. Get to know people and what makes them tick, and what are those superpowers, and where do you not want to be leaving someone. I'm not an implementer, by the way. I'm a shaper, like you.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. That to me reminds me of the fact that we need to be proactive, right? If a business is sinking and I was going to say shit's hitting the fan. I think it's appropriate to say it, right? So much is happening all at once, and I want that oxygen mask. That's not the best time to be able to implement preventative strategies, right? We need to get in there way sooner. And what you've just identified there is, hiring the right team, profiling the right staff, figuring out who is on your team and, supporting them in their strength zone. Fantastic initiatives. But businesses are all on their own journey. And yeah, it's very interesting to hear that. I'm glad that you've shared that with us all. I would like to see if anyone from the panelists, I'll just leave it open, would like to share what's something that you've done to support your team's mental health in the last 6 months. It could just be a comment that you want to drop in there. The reason I asked this question is, if you are a manager or a leader, what are we doing to actually shape that behavior so that it trickles down to our other team and staff? Piers, I can see your microphone's ready to go.
Yeah, well, I have team members who are in Victoria, so they've been, as everyone knows, in lockdown for most of the year, which is super stressful. One of the main people who work with us, Cassie, has a young baby and 2 young boys in primary school. So she's been at home with a young baby, she's had to homeschool. And so it's been really important to make sure that she's okay. And there's 3 things we've done. So one thing, we've sent her care packs just to know that she's loved and we're thinking about her and we hope that she's okay. But the second thing is just reaching out to her and saying, we're happy to offer you full flexibility. So if you can't handle anything, just let us know, it's fine. And we can take on those roles and get someone else to help. Or if we're not giving you enough work and you need more work and you can handle more, let us know. We can do that as well. So that really open communication with her and just letting her know, we're here for you to support you. And if you need to take the next 3 months off, that's okay. If you want to keep going, that's okay too. And just giving her permission to just let us know what works for her. I think that's really important. And the other thing, the third thing that we're doing is really like encouraging her, a lot of positive feedback, publicly acknowledging her, putting up posts on our social media saying how amazing she is and thank you so much for your work. I think that extra acknowledgement and encouragement and positive reinforcement is really important for someone who's going through such a hard time, because it is a really hard time for her right now. So yeah, that's what we're doing.
Absolutely. And it sounds like, I'm sure all the HR people in the room are also nodding their heads acknowledgement. Well done. I know Amanda has dropped a comment checking in. Did you want to talk on that, or do you want me to just talk through it?
Yeah, for me, it was just about connecting, and just, you know, that random phone call or even that text message to say, have a great day. Just letting them know again, like the ladies have, you know, like Peace mentioned, that we are thinking of them. We may not be in the office, or we may not be having those meetings like we did. And just to remind each other that we were having a 30, 40-minute or more maybe commute to and from work, where we could either, you know, start to get connected for the day and then deconnect, you know, whether it's singing in the, you know, singing in the car on the way home. It's that disconnect, and we weren't having that. You know, we were moving from the study into the kitchen, and we had seconds, not minutes, you know, to disconnect from that day. And it's important, and, you know, we've got to remember that. And it's just about, you know, like was mentioned earlier, if it all just gets too much, just walk away and take some time out.
Absolutely. And it's getting there before you need to, as in, don't wait until you need that oxygen mask when you start to feel some of those signs approaching. And just checking the chat box, because there are a few now, but just from the panelists. Yes, a spa day sounds fantastic. What a great way. And particularly if that's a spa day for your staff, it would be fabulous to fund that. And sharing your feelings, absolutely. And every business is different in that dynamic. Working with some business leaders in this space, I've actually heard echoed back that there are some managers that are actually scared to have that relationship with their team, because it's like, let's keep up a work front, you know, so they forget to just check in on individuals as individuals. But I'm just checking the clock, and we've only got 10 minutes left. I thought we would have plenty to talk about. I do just want to throw it to the floor for those that have been sitting in this panel. You do have a brains trust around you of some wonderful proactive and preventative women that are on this panel. So if you have any questions, now's a chance, because it's a great time to pick various people's heads. Just leave a moment, or even for the panelists, if you guys have any questions or any further comments, now's a chance.
I think, Ali, on what you were touching base with just before about leaders wanting to, you know, hold that stoic, you know, business approach. I think, you know, like you were saying, for us to let everybody know, you know, if we're wanting our team to reach out to us when things aren't going well, we need to do the same for them, and giving them
shape that behavior,
that it's okay.
And to show the vulnerability, I think, Amanda, you're right, because it's not all, and that's been a good lesson for me. You don't have to put the brave face on. It's okay to share and go, you know what, I'm having a crap day. So leave me alone. But Ali, I just wanted to touch back, because that really just sort of stuck in my brain there when you said about the oxygen mask. So with those sort of particularly with the corporates, and based upon what Carla was saying about, you know, they can be toxic environments. There's two things: the poor people who are in the environment, the staff. What potentially can they do to reach out to you to then help their managers, etc.? Do you know what I mean? With the process. And then also, how do they get past that feeling of everything is such a mess? So can they even think about what that next step is? So I guess, what is that first little point? Is it just to call you guys to move forward?
Mm-hmm. So are you talking about when you say to reach out to us as from a MindBlank perspective, as in how can MindBlank help those conversations, or are you talking about as a bystander in that workplace?
No, as in MindBlank. So yes.
Yeah. Well, what can MindBlank do, and what is the program that we can assist? So, oops, my phone's going off. All good. So if a staff member, so it sounds like what you're asking is if a staff member acknowledges that there could be a bit of a toxic environment and they're overwhelmed, but then they reach out to us to say, hey, what could you do for our workplace? we would have a conversation with that staff member or with that workplace to see if they are open to running our program. Our sessions do have one-on-one sessions with the supervisors and managers separate to the staff. So as Carla mentioned before, what MindBlank does is we use videos. So we've filmed some stories of lived experience. So we'd take everyone in that workplace through a session where we get to see the scenario to start to paint a picture as to what signs and symptoms are developing for mental health. We then would go through a pathway as to how can we intervene in that particular scenario, highlighting what the help seeking opportunities are for that individual. Now, the programs that we have aren't necessarily going to be tailored for every single different sector. So we would then have a separate session splitting up the employees so that we can have the conversation with the managers and supervisors. And that session's really about getting the basics out there, but bouncing back from that workplace to see what their actual recommendations are. Because sometimes these workplaces haven't even checked in with their staff. They might not have any structures. They might not have any policies. They might not even have any crisis support for their team. So this could actually be the first time that team is having a dialogue about what mental health looks like. So we really, like, our team starts to have a conversation to see where that business is at. So what systems are in place, you know, and what systems are not in place. So sometimes that's a matter of just piecing apart where is the business at right now and what are the recommendations the staff themselves could already start to suggest to build some of those stepping stones to a proactive mental wellbeing strategy. So what MindBlank would do is we would take the recommendations from the supervisors and managers session and take the recommendations from the employee session to then hand the workplace some recommendations they can put in practice. So ideally, what we want to see is the leadership team have taken mental health seriously and have an opportunity to listen directly to their staff and team as to what systems they can start to put in place. Where MindBlank sits with that is that we would check in with the team to see how it's going. We're not necessarily going to put that in action for them, you know, so it really will be up to the business as to what they do with it. But what we would want to see is that the business has taken the session seriously. 6 months down the track, they've started to implement at least you know, 1 or 2 suggestions from that. We would be able to check in 12 months down the track to see where they are. Ideally, we would love to see that a business is open-minded to implementing proactive mental wellbeing strategies. We would like to see businesses taking action to create mental health policies, you know, to put some preventative wellness strategies in place. Where MindBlank could then assist them is we would be open to having conversations with that workplace to really paint a picture to see, well, what's actually happening for them. Because what's going to really hit the nail on the head is the business working with us to actually share some stories that are actually going on for them so that we could repeat the process to actually go in and have some sessions with what they're actually seeing in the workplace to improve the business culture. But it doesn't take one person to change that, you know, and it really is going to take buy-in from leadership, management down to the staff. So hopefully that answers your first question. But in terms of your second question, it sounds like what you were asking is, what if you're a staff member that identifies that this could potentially be a toxic environment? What can I actually do to improve this system? Because it can feel hopeless, you know. And I can see Gabe here today. You're in our session. And, you know, who's shared with me very similar experience within a previous workplace where it's suffocating and you as one individual can feel like you lose your voice and you're disempowered, and it feels like no matter what you do, you can't change that culture, you know. But from an individual's perspective, you can control your own reactions to it. You know, you can put your own oxygen mask on. I think Carla pointed that out several times, that sometimes if no one else is going to do that for you, you have no choice. And your body has a fabulous way of, if you're not taking time out yourself, it will shut down and take that time out for you. So as an individual, And like our program definitely focuses on an individual as well. It's not just what the workplace culture could do, but what can you do to put your own oxygen mask on? And if you continue to train your emotional health, then you'll be building your resilience, right? So all of that mindfulness, meditation, even exercise, whatever you need to keep you well, that's what you're in control of in that hectic, chaotic environment. Ideally, you would like to say that as an individual, you're also in control of, you know, having discussions with other people. Oops, my lighting just went haywire. Having discussions with other people in your workplace could build reinforcements for you, and reinforcements can take you on that journey so that hopefully you can together have that conversation about how we can change this culture, you know. But I have heard from various corporate setting that if you're caught in that middle management, if you don't have buy-in from the top tier, and if there are not policies in place from the top tier, you can burn your middle managers out. You as an individual can burn out here if you're trying to carry that workload. So yeah, it breaks my heart to hear stories like Carla's, but unfortunately it's a sad reality that sometimes if the environment is really toxic, sometimes the only way out is out. But at least there are regulators now that are making businesses liable for some of this stuff. So I had spoken to Carla about some of those signs and symptoms she identified from the doctor. You can now take that to court, you know, and you can keep, these businesses can get into trouble with that. And I know in the suicide prevention space as well, there's conversations going on in different states, but in Victoria in particular, they're really onto it. You know, if there's signs of workplace bullying and there's signs of a staff member who's taken their life, there's very harsh penalties for that. So keep up the conversation of mental wellbeing.
I think on that point, Ali, I would like to chip in and just offer a slightly different view around the legalities. If you've got an employee who finds themselves in that situation where they're really struggling, you know, whatever it is, anxiety, depression, like their general mental health as a result of the workplace situation that they find themselves in, they're already mentally incapacitated to then actually, for them to think about saying, well, I'm going to go up against my employer now and take this into a legal battle is probably not an option for, I would suggest, the majority of individuals. So this is why I think it's so important that there is a mental health and wellness program in place, and there is constant awareness and training that's being delivered month in, month out. It's not just a, you know, every 6 months we do a mental health awareness session for the staff. It's got to be something that's a continuation throughout that period of time. And yes, you know, there will be some organisations who suffer and they will get hit with those fines. But I would say 9 times out of 10, those individuals who find themselves in that situation cannot take any more. So they're not going to take that on.
I think, Michelle, you were pointing that out with your question too as well. Like if someone's so overwhelmed, like particularly, let's just say with COVID, I've seen increase of anxiety, is people are experiencing panic attacks for the first time where they've had no history of mental health issues before. So there's this level of not even being aware that that's going to happen, that's happening, right? So when you are in the eye of the storm, not ideal. Now I've noticed the time, so it's already 5:32. There is just one more question that someone has sent through. How do you start these conversations within your workplace if it doesn't currently support openness around mental health? Does anyone want to tackle that question as a final, that's it, our sign off today?
Beer o'clock now then, Ali.
Well, I think,
I think, Ali, that was really, I think you sort of answered that question. That was really my question.
Yeah, okay.
I think what I love about what we're doing today is, to be honest, if that was me in the environment, I would now take this video and show it to my employer. You know, this whole Zoom session or something similar, to say, you know, this is not just me. Please just watch this please just have a look at what the opportunities are. Because look, if I think back to my corporate days, and oh my God, I really have pushed so much down. I just don't even think that so many people are even aware of any of this, you know, and they wouldn't even know where to start. So sometimes I just think by them being, if a poor employee, even just, again, these people on my list here, go, you know what, would you mind just watching this? Because I think this is something we potentially need to look at, and let that go. At least it's opening the door, you know, start somewhere.
Yeah, for sure.
I think you, like Michelle, I don't know whether you agree with this, but I think you become institutionalized over a while after you've been in corporates for such a long time. You know what's expected of you within your role as an executive leader. You know what policies and procedures and processes that you need to underpin that business. And it's so very easy to lose sight of the fact that, you know, you're a human being,
yes,
as is everybody else. So maybe there's some changes to board reports that are actually being produced to get this kind of discussion on the table a little bit more in terms of the initiatives that are being carried out within those organisations, so that it keeps it a regular discussion and it makes people accountable, and you take ownership for driving that throughout the business throughout the year. So it's not just a set and forget attitude, as I call it, with some of these policies and procedures. So yes, you know, we all go through an audit every year, and we have to review those policies and make any legislative changes in there. But what are we actually doing in terms of continuing the awareness in the training? And that's where I think, Ali, the training production videos that you've got, that are the short, sharp examples of what people are actually feeling and going through, and the impact maybe of work that work colleagues can have on those individuals, are so powerful. They're way more powerful than you probably coming into an organisation and delivering a PowerPoint presentation about what mental health and wellness is, because they're showing real examples in real situations of what individuals are going through right now. So I don't know if anyone else has seen those, but that would be something, you know, if I was mind blank, I'd be sharing those short, sharp videos to get those conversations on the table and provide, like Michelle is suggesting, hey, look, have you seen this? And it provides a safe place for that person to take that into their organisation.
great idea.
Thanks, Carla. And I think it's certainly the magic of the lived experience stories and the power of the arts, I think, that can translate those stories to make it relatable to people. And I will just share that anyone that wants to actually take part in one of our programs, so the video session to actually see how it applies in the workplace, next Wednesday, the Greater Brisbane Mental Health Expo is an online expo, and they're actually hosting a free session to community. So they've covered the costs for that. So I'll include that link at the bottom of the live video on Facebook, and when we implement this up on YouTube as well. So let's keep the conversations going. Before we close, just thank you so much, everyone, for coming tonight, starting this conversation. Let's keep it going. I know there were several people who RSVP'd for this event, so we'll make that this video available to them as well. My final call to action for you all is just a reminder that Queensland Health has actually helped support Mindbank to get 400 women to go through our program between now and December. So we're on the hunt for 12 businesses, approximately 400 women. So that could be individuals that may be a small business owner that could sign up to their own session. So for now, we're going to put an expression of interest out there. So if you've got an interest or you've got stakeholders that would be interested in taking part of this program, we want to hear from you guys. So we'll make sure that everyone that's come tonight receives the link. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you to all the panelists for coming here tonight and sharing your stories and your contributions and wisdoms. You never know what gestures will go out to support other people right now.
All right.